You ever have one of those weeks where something so absurd, so backwards, so downright mean-spirited happens, that you stop, set your coffee down, and say, "No, surely I heard that wrong"? That's how it started. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning in our quiet little corner of northern Arizona. I was out back, tossing a red tennis ball for Duke, my 12-year-old lab mix with a heart of gold and arthritis in 3 legs, when I got the letter. The envelope was too clean, too crisp. The typeface was sterile and smug, like it knew it didn't belong here among old oak mailboxes and hand-painted house numbers. Sunset Ridge Property Owners Association, it read, bold and proud. I opened it without thinking, figuring it was another update on lawn watering schedules, or maybe that damned 4th of July potluck Karen kept trying to organize with a gluten-free pie contest. But no, my hands trembled as I read those words. Sharp and cruel in their finality, effective immediately. Dogs of all breeds, sizes, and temperaments are no longer permitted to reside within the community limits of Sunset Ridge. Violators will be fined and reported for non-compliance. I thought it was a joke. April Fools maybe, but it was the middle of July. The kind of July where the air smells like creosote and sun-baked gravel, and old folks sit in front of oscillating fans just to survive the heat. Not the kind of month where neighbors prank each other with fake legal threats. Now, to understand just how insane this was, you have to understand what kind of place Sunset Ridge was. We're not one of those polished picket fence suburbs where every lawn looks like a magazine ad. No, this is more old folks here know how to fix a fence, mend a gate, and patch a roof with duct tape and sheer stubbornness. We have horses on some properties, chickens on others, and nearly everyone has a dog. Some have 3. The dogs here don't just keep company, they keep coyotes away. They herd goats. They warn us when the UPS guy's lurking. They're family dots, so when the HOA declared war on our dogs, it wasn't just a rule change, it was a full-blown declaration of cultural annihilation. And like any good war, it started with a villain. Her name was Karen Withers. Of course it was Karen. Moved in about a year prior from Scottsdale, big city woman, worked remotely, wore yoga pants like a uniform, and drove a Lexus SUV so clean it probably got waxed weekly. From day one, she rubbed folks the wrong way, complained about how loud the crickets were, filed a formal noise complaint when old Roy's rooster crowed at dawn, brought a petition to modernize the neighborhood sign, which had been handed by Jake's late grandfather in 1972, and worst of all, she hated dogs. She made that clear from the moment she laid eyes on Duke, called him unsightly, said he lowered property value with his limp and cloudy eye. She once stood on her manicured front lawn with a tape measure, recording how far his leash extended beyond my front steps. Violation, she chirped, like it gave her a thrill, but banning old dogs, that was a whole new level of madness. At first I figured it wouldn't stick. I'd seen dumb HOA proposals come and go, the kind where some board member, which tries to outlaw flagpoles or enforce matching shutters. But this was different. It passed quietly behind closed doors, while most of us were minding our own business. Turns out Karen had somehow weaseled her way into being HOA president. When old Mr. Lantham stepped down after his knee surgery, she stacked the board with 2 other newcomers, a couple of her wine club buddies who didn't know a thing about rural living and thought dogs were accessories, not companions. And just like that, it was law. The neighborhood was stunned. Some folks didn't even believe it until they saw the signs go up. Notice, pet-free, ZONE per HOA, mandate 11.3c. One family tried to laugh it off, the McKinneys, over on Ashwood Drive, but that laughter died real quick when they got hit with a $500 fine for their beagle. Buttercup being visible from the street. Buttercup, for God's sake, she weighed 20 pounds soaking wet and wore pink bows on her ears. And that's when it got personal. Because 3 days later I came home from the feed store to find a yellow sticker slapped across my front window. HOA non-compliance notice, canine presence detected. You have 72 hours to remove the animal or face escalating penalties. My heart damn near stopped. Duke was laying on the porch half asleep with his tail thumping like it always did when he saw me, and they wanted me to take him away. My best friend, my shadow, the dog who once dragged me half a mile through snow when I threw my back out, hauling hay in '09. Hell no. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the porch with Duke's head on my boot, listening to the desert wind whistle through the Joshua trees. The stars above seemed to burn hotter with every hour, and I knew something had to be done. I wasn't going to be the guy who gave up his dog to appease a bored suburban tyrant, so I made a decision the next morning. I printed out a flyer on that rickety old Epson printer that lives in my garage. Emergency neighborhood meeting. Saturday 6 p.m. my barn. I walked door to door handing it out like gospel, and I saw the look in my neighbor's eyes. Not just anger, betrayal. This wasn't about dogs anymore. This was about power, about control, about an outsider walking in and turning our way of life into some HOA brochure fantasy. Saturday came fast. I swept out the barn, pulled up chairs, even set out a jug of sweet tea. By 6 o'clock sharp, The place was full. Ranchers, retirees, young couples, even old Roy with his rooster tucked under one arm like a badge of defiance. You could feel it in the air, a kind of righteous heat, like the whole valley was holding its breath. And right when I stood to speak, right when I was about to say the first words in what would become the rebellion of Sunset Ridge, Karen showed up in heels with a clipboard and a smug little smile that said, "I know something you don't." She stepped into the barn like she owned it, looked around at the hay bales and oil lanterns like they were beneath her and said, "Well, isn't this cute?" I looked her dead in the eye, heart pounding, and said, "We're not going anywhere, and neither are our dogs." She tapped her clipboard once, smirked, and with the whole barn watching, she said, "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure." And just like that, the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. The second that cruiser rolled up my gravel driveway, the entire barn went dead silent. You could hear the wind creak through the rafters, the shift of boots on old wood, and somewhere in the back, Mrs. Callahan whispering, "Oh Lord, she brought the law." Duke sat up at my feet, his ears twitching, not growling, just alert, watching, like he always did when he knew trouble had come calling. Now, Sheriff Buddy Rankin had been a friend of mine since high school. We played JV baseball together, fished the Verde River every summer, and both got our hearts broken by the same redhead in 79 different years. Same result. He was an honest man, fair to a fault, and not the kind to go around enforcing nonsense unless someone forced his hand. He stepped out of the cruiser with a sigh big enough to move dust, tipped his hat to the barn crowd, gave me a weary look and said, "Evenin', Tom." "Evenin', buddy," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Didn't expect you tonight." "I didn't expect to be here either," he said. Then he turned toward Karen, who was already marching up beside him like she owned the badge. "This her idea." Karen grinned, the kind of grin that makes a man itch to build a taller fence. "Sheriff, I have every right to request enforcement of HOA compliance. Section 8B gives the board emergency powers in the case of a community-wide violation, and we are facing one flagrant ongoing defiance of HOA rules." Buddy looked down at his clipboard, then back at her. "It's about the dogs." She crossed her arms. "It's about order. These people are refusing to follow the new community standards. And this one," she gestured at me like I was a stray coyote, "is organizing an illegal assembly to undermine board authority. He distributed flyers without board approval, hosted an unregistered gathering, and is harboring a prohibited animal," the barn murmured, like a storm about to break. Someone coughed. Old Roy muttered, "This woman's lost her whole mind." Buddy turned to me. "Tom, tell me this ain't about Duke." "It's all about Duke," I said, "and Buttercup, and Daisy, and Boone, and every other dog in this neighborhood that's been a part of our lives since before. Karen even knew this valley had a name." He sighed again, longer this time. I figured Karen's eyes narrowed. "You have to issue a citation." "No," Buddy said, slowly, firmly. "I don't. This ain't a criminal matter. It's a civil dispute. You want to find these folks. You take it up with a judge. But I'm not here to arrest good people for sitting in a barn with their dogs." Now that got applause. Not the clapping kind. We're not a clapping bunch, but boots stomping, heads nodding, folks whispering damn right under their breath. Karen turned beet red. You could almost see steam puffing out of her ears. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret undermining me." Buddy raised a brow. "Karen, I regret getting out of bed for this nonsense." She stomped back to her SUV, heels clicking across the gravel like angry punctuation, and peeled out of the driveway, in a cloud of dust and ego. Once she was gone, Buddy stepped closer to me, leaned in, and said low enough that only I could hear, "You got about a week before she files something bigger. She'll go legal. Bet on it. You'd better be ready." I nodded. "We will be." And that night, we were the rebellion of Sunset Ridge wasn't a flash in the pan. It was the kindling of a fire that had been waiting for a spark. The barn meeting turned into a committee. We called ourselves the Pack. Everyone contributed. Emily from Lot 17, former paralegal, volunteered to research the bylaws. The twins from Cedar Lane, both IT guys, built a website to collect HOA documents and track fines. Jake the carpenter started making Save Our Dogs signs with hand-painted pop. And me, I wrote letters to the county, the state, the news, anyone who might listen. But while we organized, Karen escalated. Within 4 days, every dog owner in Sunset Ridge received a certified letter stating that fines would triple weekly for non-removal and that liens could be filed on homes that refused to comply. She cited obscure bylaw amendments no one had ever heard of, things probably written in fine print when the HOA was first formed by some developer back in the 80s. She posted armed security guards at the main gate on weekends. She even hired a drone company to fly over backyards and monitor compliance. That's when we knew she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was declaring war. Duke, meanwhile, was slowing down. I could see it in the way he climbed stairs, in the way he looked at me when the porch lights came on at night. That old soul kind of dog look that said, "I'm tired, boss, but I'll stay as long as you need me." He didn't understand what was going on. Not really, but he knew something was wrong. And that knowing, that deep, loyal awareness made my blood boil then, just when we thought it couldn't get worse. It did. One morning, Mrs. Callahan, bless her, 72 years old and tougher than rawhide, found a note taped to her door. Not an official letter, not an HOA document, just a scrap of paper, scrawled in Sharpie. Get rid of the mutt or we'll do it for you. Someone, and we knew who, had started crossing a line. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was fear, intimidation, threats. We reported it to Buddy. He took it seriously, started an investigation, but without cameras or witnesses. His hands were tied. So we took matters into our own. That Saturday, the entire pack met at my barn again. This time, we didn't just talk, we plotted. We organized shifts to walk the streets and keep watch. We pooled money for legal fees. And then Emily, sweet little Emily, who wore reading glasses on a pearl chain and looked like she taught Sunday school, dropped the bomb. She'd found something in the original HOA charter, something big, section 2, she said, holding up the document like it was a winning lottery ticket. Founding provisions: pet ownership may not be restricted unless unanimously agreed upon by all charter-signing residents or their direct descendants. Everyone stared. Jake blinked. Wait, so unless the original owners or their kids agree, the board can't? Ban dogs, exactly, she said. And I checked. Karen wasn't one of them. None of the new board members were, but Tom was, and so were 6 other families still living here. The barn erupted. It wasn't just a glimmer of hope. It was a full-blown wrecking ball aimed straight at Karen's little empire. We had leverage, we had history, we had the truth, but we also had a deadline, because the very next morning, 3 homes, including mine, received formal lien notices. Karen had followed through on her threat. She was weaponizing property law, and we had 5 days to respond before foreclosure proceedings could be triggered. 5 days. To save our homes, our dogs, our lives, and Duke. Duke had just stopped eating and didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I sat beside Duke on the living room floor, my back against the wall, his head resting heavy in my lap. He hadn't touched his food since noon. Just drank water now and then and let out those soft, huffing sighs that dogs do when they know something is deeply wrong but can't put it into words. I ran my fingers through his gray speckled coat and stared at the lien notice spread across the coffee table like a death sentence. It was real. Karen had filed it. A lien, not just a fine, not just a warning, but a legal chokehold on my home. The house I built with my own hands back in 1984, 2 years after I married Ella. The same house where Duke was born. In a cardboard box in the laundry room on a stormy February night. The same house where we'd buried Ella just 5 years ago, under the cottonwood tree by the fence line. And now this woman, this HOA dictator in yoga pants, was trying to take it away because I wouldn't give up my dog. It felt like something had snapped inside me. Not in a reckless, angry way, but in that deep, slow burn kind of way where you realize, enough is enough. I made a promise to Duke, right there in the dark, with his breathing steady and slow beside me. They're not talking this place, I whispered, and they sure as hell ain't talking you. Come morning, we got to work. Emily drafted a cease and desist based on Section 2A of the founding HOA charter. She cited case law precedent and threatened a full countersuit if the board didn't immediately rescind the dog ban. We had 7 original family signatures on record, enough to challenge any amendment under the descendant clause. Jake and the twins scanned everything, archived it, and had it uploaded to our Resistance website by noon. We called it the Bark Back Project. People started sharing it on social media. Locals from outside the neighborhood reached out. Even a retired attorney in Flagstaff emailed to offer help pro bono. But just when momentum started to turn in our favor, Karen struck back, and this time, she crossed a whole new line. Around 3 p.m. that same day, Roy called me, voice trembling. You better get over here, Tom, it's Duke. I dropped everything and ran. Roy lived 1 street over. When I got there, I saw it. The drone, a black, military-looking thing, about 2 feet wide, hovering over Roy's yard. It was filming, zooming in on Duke, who was lying in a shady patch of grass near Roy's porch, where he'd wandered while I was out back with the pack. The thing was tracking him, watching him. What the hell is that? I shouted. Roy shook his head. It showed up 15 minutes ago, flew right down and started circling him. Spooked the rooster so bad he flew into the chicken wire. I grabbed a broom from Roy's garage and hurled it straight at the drone. Missed, but barely. It zipped upward, like a scared hornet, then darted toward the eastern edge of the neighborhood back toward Karen's house. You think she's behind it? Roy asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That night we held an emergency pack meeting, only this time we didn't use the barn. We met in driveways, in small circles, whispered. We knew Karen had eyes on us now, literally, but what she didn't know was what Emily found next. At about 8:30, just as the Arizona sun dipped behind the Red Rock Ridge, and the air turned that familiar desert cooler, Emily knocked on my door with a grin I hadn't seen in weeks. I found it, she said. Found what? The deed. She handed me a manila folder, original property deed for Sunset Ridge, signed by the founding developer, one Clifford W. Abernathy, dated July 6, 1982. The language was dry, but one clause stood out in bold print. No amendments to the original charter shall supersede Section 2A or alter the domestic composition of homesteads without unanimous and direct democratic vote of legacy owners. And just like that, we had the silver bullet. We called a meeting for the next night. This time we didn't hide it. We wanted her to see. Karen showed up early, with two of her clipboard cronies in tow. Lisa from Lot 29, the one who thought bees should be banned, and Bryce, her smug little sidekick who once called Roy's horses agricultural hazards. We laid it all out. The deed, the signatures, the clause. Karen didn't blink. She just smiled, cold, reptilian, and said, "That document means nothing. The board passed the amendment legally. If you don't like it, you're welcome to sue." Emily, bless her soul, leaned forward and said, "We already filed." That wiped the smile off her face. "The papers went to the county this morning," I said. "Temporary injunction. We've got standing. You've got trouble." Karen looked like someone had hit her with a cactus paddle, but she recovered quick. "Your dog still violated the order," she said, jabbing a finger at me. "And you're still harboring a prohibited animal." "Not anymore," I said. She blinked. "What?" I turned and pointed behind her. Duke was standing tall, or as tall as his old bones would let him, beside the county animal welfare van we'd arranged for the meeting. Not to take him away, to register him as a certified service animal under the Arizona revised statutes. His paperwork was already stamped and signed. Karen sputtered. "That's abuse of the system." "No," I said, stepping closer. "That's knowing the law better than you do." She stormed off again, but this time without the usual smugness, because now she knew the tides were turning. Still, we weren't out of the woods. 2 days later, Bryce filed an emergency counterclaim on behalf of the HOA, arguing that the deed clause was antiquated and invalid under modern governance. Karen held a press conference. I kid you not, in front of the new HOA building she had leased with association funds. She declared that Sunset Ridge would not become a refuge for animal anarchy. We laughed, but we also braced ourselves. The court date was set for the following Monday. 5 days to prove the soul of the neighborhood was more than a line in a bylaw. 5 days to protect the legacy of Sunset Ridge and the dogs that made it home. And that's when someone broke into my house. It was just past 1 a.m. when I heard the sound. Not a bang, not a crash, but the distinct, careful click of a window latch easing open. Subtle, deliberate, the kind of sound someone makes when they don't want to be heard. But I was awake. Been sleeping light for weeks now. Duke stirred from his corner bed, ears twitching. He didn't bark, just growled low, deep in his chest. The kind of growl that meant danger was inside the perimeter. I eased out of bed, grabbed the old baseball bat I kept propped by the dresser. Not for sports, mind you, but for situations exactly like this. I crept down the hallway in the dark, heart thudding in my ears. The front of the house was still, nothing out of place, but when I turned the corner into the kitchen, I caught movement, silhouette backlit by moonlight through the open window. A man mid-30s maybe, dressed in all-black hoodie, cargo pants, gloves. He had a small camera in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He hadn't seen me yet. He was bent over, aiming the camera toward Duke's empty food bowl, like he was trying to make it look like neglect. I stepped into the frame of the hallway and said, loud and clear, "You've got 10 seconds to get out of my house before I make you part of the foundation." The man jumped hard, dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the walls, then landed on my face, bat raised. He froze, then bolted out the window, stumbling onto the porch where he landed wrong and let out a yelp. I chased after him, barefoot and furious, but by the time I made it to the yard, he'd limped into a waiting black sedan and disappeared into the night. Duke hobbled out after me, growling, but I told him to stay. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I damn near tried to run that car down on sheer will alone. Instead, I called Buddy. He showed up 20 minutes later with Deputy Lang in tow, and this time they didn't treat it like a neighborly complaint. This was criminal. Breaking and entering, trespassing, attempted evidence tampering, maybe more. I showed them the camera lens cover the guy dropped, the scuff marks on the porch rail, the window screen sliced open with what looked like a box cutter. Buddy took it all in with a clenched jaw. "They're scared," he muttered, "and desperate." "You think it was Karen?" I asked. He didn't answer, but his eyes said yes. The next morning I called an emergency PAC meeting. Folks were already gathering before the sun was up. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when it smells like sabotage. By noon, we've taken action. Jake installed new locks on every senior's house, for free. The twins rigged up motion sensor cams across key streets. Emily, bless her legal mind, filed a restraining order against any member of the HOA board attempting to step foot on private property during active litigation. But we were still rattled. If they were willing to sneak into homes and fake neglect photos, what would they do next? That answer came 48 hours later, when a neighbor, Carrie Lynn, sweet woman with 2 rescue mutts and a disabled husband, received a child welfare visit, not because of any complaint from locals. No, someone had called in an anonymous tip that her house was unhygienic due to animal waste and possibly endangering minors. She didn't have kids. It was all lies. but the state worker still had to come, had to open cabinets, take photos, inspect every room. It was humiliating, and it nearly broke her. She called me that night, voice shaking. I don't know how much more I can take. Tom, I just want to keep my dogs and be left alone. That's when I knew we had to flip the script. We'd been playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive, so we dug deeper than ever. And that's when the twins found it buried in a subfolder on the HOA's old online server. Half deleted but still recoverable, an audio file. Timestamped, titled Board Strategy Session, unofficial. We played it in my garage, the entire pack gathered around a dusty laptop like it was a war room, and what we heard made our jaws drop. Karen's voice, clear as a bell. If we get rid of the dogs, we get rid of the dog owners. They're the last holdouts, the legacy folks. Once they're gone, we can raise dues, rezone, start attracting real buyers. Another voice. Bryce, I think. Won't they push back Karen again? They won't have time. Hit them with fines, liens, legal noise. Overwhelm them. People fold when they're scared. And if we can't push them out legally, we'll make them uncomfortable enough to leave. The room went dead silent. Then Roy said, low and furious, she's not just trying to ban dogs. She's trying to flip the whole damn neighborhood. He was right. Karen's whole game wasn't about noise complaints or poop patrols. It was about gentrification, modernization, pushing out the old guard so she could turn Sunset Ridge into some sleek, soulless cul-de-sac village with polished concrete mailboxes and boutique coffee carts. But we weren't going to let that happen. Not on our watch. We burned that audio file to a dozen thumb drives, handed them to every neighbor, and made a few anonymous calls. Local news, the county commissioner, and a guy I knew from the feed store who ran a popular Facebook group called Arizona HOA Hell. Within 24 hours, the story blew up. Secret HOA recording reveals plan to force out longtime residents over dogs. The local news ran it at 5 p.m. sharp. Interviews with Duke, with Roy, with Carrie Lynn. Karen, of course, refused to comment, but her car was spotted leaving town that same evening, headed north. We thought maybe, just maybe, it was over, but Karen wasn't done yet. At exactly 8:12 p.m., the HOA issued an email blast with one final act of desperation. All residents, currently in non-compliance with Section 11.3c Canine Ban, are hereby ordered to attend a mandatory disciplinary hearing this Friday at 7 p.m. Failure to appear will result in immediate escalation to collections and lien enforcement. She was calling our bluff, and we were going to answer it. We all agreed we'd go, but we wouldn't go quietly. Friday came fast, like a dust storm rolling in low and angry. The sun dipped behind the ridge around 6:30 p.m., casting that eerie Arizona glow across Sunset Ridge, the kind of light that makes everything look burnt gold and brittle, like a world about to crack. By 6:45, the entire neighborhood had gathered. Not just the pack, not just the dog owners, everyone, people who hadn't spoken up before. Folks who didn't even own pets but were fed up with what was happening. Elderly veterans, quiet widows, single dads, people who'd stayed silent too long but now understood what was at stake. Karen had called for a hearing. She didn't expect a reckoning. The HOA clubhouse, if you could call it that, was a glorified portable office trailer she'd leased a month ago with our dues. It was decorated in beige laminate and stiff folding chairs, with a plastic water cooler humming in the corner like it hated its job. The board sat at the front like a tribunal. Karen, Bryce, and Lisa, their clipboards stacked like shields. Karen wore a white suit jacket like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. Bryce had a Bluetooth headset in one ear, which he kept adjusting even though no one was on the other end. Lisa sat with her lips pursed, as if trying to hold in a secret or a sneeze. Probably both. I walked in last, and I didn't walk in alone. Duke was right beside me, wearing a little red bandana with the word veteran printed on it, courtesy of Emily's daughter, who worked at the local animal rescue. Folks cheered as we entered, soft at first, then louder, until even Karen's smug little kingdom felt the tremble. Karen banged her gavel. Yes, she had a gavel, bought it online for $39.99 and used it like a scepter. This is a formal HOA hearing, she said, voice tight. Please take your seats. We will now address the matter of community-wide non-compliance regarding domestic animal restrictions. I stood calm as ever, hands in my pockets. You want to talk about non-compliance? I said. Let's start with that recording. Gasps. Karen's eyes went wide. Christ jumped to his feet. That was obtained illegally. Emily, seated beside Roy in the front row, raised a hand. Actually, Arizona's a one-party consent state. Only one person in the conversation needs to know it's being recorded. And guess what? The person who sent it to us was in the room. You could feel the shock roll through that room like thunder. Karen went pale. And just then Lisa stood up. Slowly, carefully. I'm done, she said. I didn't sign up for this. I thought we were just cleaning things up, making things nicer. I didn't know it meant harassing old ladies and breaking into houses. Karen stared at her. You traitor. Lisa looked back at her with tears. In her eyes, you never cared about this place. You just wanted to remake it. The room erupted. not in chaos, but in something far more powerful. Solidarity. Voices started rising. People stood one by one. They spoke. I've lived here 31 years. I've buried my husband here. And I'll be damned if I leave because someone doesn't like the way my dog barks at squirrels. You fine me $300 because my granddaughter's... The stuffed puppy was sitting on the porch. You sent a drone over my yard like I was a criminal. My father signed the original deed. You don't have the right to change our home into a damn resort brochure. Then Buddy walked in. In uniform. He stood at the back with his arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. Kieran faltered for a moment. Sheriff, this is a private. Buddy stepped forward, slow and sure. Not anymore. He walked up to the front table and dropped a thick envelope. Right in front of her, notice of injunction. Filed by the county this morning based on misuse of HOA funds, probable civil rights violations, and pending criminal investigation into intimidation, trespassing, and unlawful surveillance. Karen froze. Bryce whispered something and tried to stand. Buddy put a hand on his shoulder. Sit down, son. This ain't a Zoom call. The hearing was over just like that. But Karen didn't go quietly. She stood up, knocked her chair back and pointed at the crowd. You people are fools. You're clinging to the past. You think your dusty old yards and scruffy animals make this place special. You're holding this neighborhood back. I stepped forward. No, Kieran, I said. Steady. We're holding it together. You wanted to gut what made this place a community. But you forgot one thing. She glared at me. What? We outnumber you. And we did. By the next morning, over 90% of Sunset Ridge had signed a petition to remove Karen and Bryce from the board. Lisa resigned voluntarily. The petition passed. They were out. But it wasn't over, because Karen, well, she had one last card to play. And it was the cruelest one yet. If there's one thing I've learned in 67 years of living, it's that prideful people don't go down easy. Not when they think they've still got a shot at control. And Karen Withers didn't just want control. She wanted domination. She didn't want peace, or progress, or even pretty lawns. She wanted power. And when power slips through hands like hers, they don't just let it fall, they try to crush everything in the room with it. We thought it was over. The hearing was a landslide. The community had spoken. The board had flipped. Karen and Bryce were out, but she didn't leave town. She stayed, and then Duke disappeared. It was 2 days after the hearing. A quiet morning. I'd let Duke out into the yard like I always did. The same time as always. He moved slower these days, but he still liked to sniff around the cottonwood, the old mailbox post, and the garden where Ella's daisies used to bloom. I went inside to make coffee, came back out, and he was gone. Gate locked, fence intact, but no Duke. I searched the entire property. Called Roy, called the twins. They hit every neighbor up and down both ridges. Nothing, no sightings, no barking, just gone. And that's when I saw the note, tucked into the corner of the porch bench, folded in a neat little triangle, like something a child would pass in class. Inside, in block letters, one less mutt to worry about. I dropped to my knees right there. For a moment, the whole world just went still. Not a bird, not a breeze. Just silence, the kind that crushes your ribs and burns the back of your throat. I called Buddy. He was there in 10 minutes. Siren off, jaw tight. He took the note, bagged it, called in an official missing animal report. But we both knew. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Karen, I asked. He didn't answer. But we both knew. The next 48 hours were a blur of grief, fury, and desperation. The entire neighborhood rallied. The pack printed flyers. Teens on bikes patrolled the alleys. Roy even offered a $1,000 reward out of his own pocket. But nothing, no sign of Duke. And then, a miracle. Day 3. Late afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, watching the wind-stirred dust devils near the edge of the road, when a rusted old Chevy pulled up. Out stepped a young man, shaggy hair, grease-stained shirt, eyes tired. You, Tom? I nodded. I think I found your dog. He opened the tailgate, and there he was. Duke. Muddy, shivering, limping worse than usual. But alive. The boy said he'd seen a woman in a white SUV dump something wrapped in a tarp near the edge of town, just off an old service road that cuts behind the dry lake bed. Figured it might have been trash. But when he stopped to check, he saw Duke crawl out. Said he recognized him from the flyers. I couldn't speak, just hugged that dog until he wheezed and licked my chin. Then I slipped the kid $500, gave him Roy's reward money whether he wanted it or not. That night, the neighborhood held a bonfire, not a party, a vigil for what we almost lost, for what we still stood for, and for the fire that was now burning in every one of us. Karen had crossed the line, and she'd done it on camera, because remember those motion-triggered cams the twins installed? One of them caught the SUV, not the license plate, but the bumper, sticker, and the back window decal that said Sunset Ridge, HOA, leadership through vision. It was Karen's vehicle. We sent the footage to the county, to the sheriff's office, to every news outlet we'd contacted before. Emily filed a formal charge for animal cruelty. The local news led with the story the next night. Former HOA president under investigation for alleged animal dumping. They didn't mince words. And the community, they were done being polite. The next day, Someone, I won't name names, spray-painted dog dumpers get dumped across the abandoned HOA trailer. By noon, every board Karen had nailed to a community post had been taken down. By evening, Sunset Ridge had voted, unanimously, to dissolve the HOA. No more dues, no more clipboards, no more Karen. The sheriff issued a warrant for questioning, but Karen had vanished. Rumors said she skipped town, headed back to Scottsdale or maybe California, somewhere her money could still buy silence, and the neighborhood healed. Slowly, tenderly. Duke never quite recovered the same, but he was home. He got steak for dinner that whole week, and belly rubs from every neighbor on the street. We replanted Ella's daisies that spring. Roy's rooster got a little louder. Carrie Lynn got a rescue puppy to join her pack. And one quiet Thursday afternoon, a stranger pulled up in a dusty blue sedan and said something that stuck with me forever. He looked around, then nodded and said, "You folks fought back. Most don't." I said, "We didn't just fight, we stayed. That's what wins." The desert has a way of keeping secrets long after the dust settles, long after the last argument fades into the wind. And yet, somehow, the truth always finds its way through the cracks. Out here, in the dry sun and red dirt, nothing stays buried forever. Karen might have thought she could vanish, but Sunset Ridge had roots deeper than her kind could understand. It was about 3 weeks after she skipped town that the letter arrived, not addressed to me, or Roy, or even the new acting board, but to the pack, by name. It came from a lawyer out of Phoenix, a young woman named Sadie Abernathy. That last name rang a bell for Emily. She looked it up, combed through the old deeds again. Sure enough, Sadie was the granddaughter of Clifford W. Abernathy, the original developer of Sunset Ridge. In the envelope was a notarized statement, a legal one. Signed, stamped, sealed in blue ink. It is the formal wish of the Abernathy family to revoke and terminate all remaining corporate interest in Sunset Ridge's HOA entity. Sunset Ridge was built as a free community. The original charter was drafted to preserve domestic integrity and rural dignity, not enforce tyranny. Any future attempts to resurrect the HOA structure under the Abernathy Charter are hereby illegally forbidden under legacy ownership protections. It was over, not just Karen's HOA but any future Karen. Done erased. Official Sunset Ridge was finally, legally and permanently, free. We threw a block party that weekend. First one in over 10 years. Kids rode bikes between driveways. Dogs ran free through backyards. Roy played his harmonica under the oak tree, and someone, don't ask who, brought a homemade Karen piñata stuffed with fortune cookies that said things like "No dogs allowed" and "Please repaint your soul." Duke got his own honorary collar, hand-tooled leather with a silver medallion stamped, #1 citizen of Sunset Ridge. He wore it like royalty. But as the sun dipped and the laughter settled, I sat on the porch with him beside me, looking out over the place we'd fought so hard to save, the fences, the cottonwoods, the dusk breeze, the same view I'd had since '84, same quiet, same comfort. Only now, it meant more, because we'd nearly lost it. Not just the dogs, not just the land, but each other, and we'd gotten it back. There's a kind of pride that doesn't come with awards or speeches. It comes from standing your ground when it would have been easier to fold. From saying, "Not here, not today." From refusing to let fear rewrite what family means. The real story of Sunset Ridge ain't about a dog band. It's about the folks who said no. It's about the pack, and it's about the old man with a worn-out lab who looked a bully in the face and said, "This ends here." We never saw Karen again. Rumor has it she tried to start over in a suburb outside Sacramento, joined another HOA, made waves about someone's decorative gnome. But folks there, they'd seen our story, watched the local news coverage, read about Duke, about the recording, about the bonfire and the banner that read, "The Ridge Barks Back." She didn't last long. Funny how a place like ours, humble, dusty, unpolished, could spark something bigger. A conversation, a movement even. HOA reform talk started popping up across the county. People citing our case, our fight. Sunset Ridge became more than a neighborhood, it became a symbol, and I'll tell you this much, every morning now, when Duke and I walk the same dirt trail we always have, no drones, no fines, no glares, I feel it. In the way the air moves. In the neighbors wave, the sound of barking dogs echoing through the canyon like a chorus of freedom. We didn't just win, we preserved something sacred. And if you're listening to this, maybe you're in your own Ridge, maybe you've got your own Karen, your own clipboard war. Let me say one thing to you. From an old man who's seen the worst of it and come out the other side. Stand tall. Don't fold. And for God's sake, never give up on your dog. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got more wild HOA tales coming your way.